President Trump faces a critical challenge funding his ambitious agenda while navigating the political landmines of Medicaid cuts. House Republicans, eager to balance the budget and finance Trump's priorities, have proposed significant reductions to the program. However, these cuts have sparked fierce opposition, raising concerns about their impact on millions of Americans who rely on Medicaid for healthcare. Trump, wary of repeating the political fallout from the failed 2017 attempt to repeal the Affordable Care Act, has expressed reservations about deep cuts to Medicaid. This tension between funding Trump's agenda and protecting Medicaid has created a high-stakes dilemma with significant consequences for both parties and the American people. The specter of the 2017 ACA repeal attempt looms large over the current Medicaid debate. Trump and Republicans faced a firestorm of criticism for their efforts to dismantle the ACA, which included substantial cuts to Medicaid. The images of constituents confronting their representatives at town halls, outraged by the prospect of losing their health care, remain etched in the political landscape. The failure of the ACA repeal effort demonstrated the political potency of health care as an issue, particularly for vulnerable populations. Trump, acutely aware of this history, is understandably cautious about revisiting Medicaid cuts that could alienate voters and jeopardize his re-election prospects. House Republicans, led by Speaker Mike Johnson, view Medicaid as a prime target for budget cuts. They argue that reining in Medicaid spending is essential to funding Trump's priorities, such as tax cuts, border security, and increased defense spending. However, critics contend that these cuts disproportionately impact the most vulnerable Americans, including low-income families, children, the elderly, and individuals with disabilities. The GOP's strategy hinges on rolling back the ACA's Medicaid expansion, which extended coverage to millions of Americans. They propose reducing the federal government's share of funding for the expansion, shifting more of the financial burden onto states. This move could leave states grappling with difficult choices: raise taxes, cut other essential programs, or reduce Medicaid eligibility and benefits. The proposed Medicaid cuts encompass a range of measures, each with potentially devastating consequences for beneficiaries. One proposal involves capping federal Medicaid funding to states, limiting the amount of money states receive regardless of need. This approach could force states to make difficult decisions about who qualifies for coverage and what services are covered. Another proposal targets the ACA's enhanced federal funding for the Medicaid expansion population. Reducing this funding could create significant budgetary shortfalls for states, potentially leading to cuts in eligibility, benefits, or provider reimbursement rates. Such cuts could have a ripple effect throughout the healthcare system, impacting access to care for millions of Americans. Section 5 Work Requirements, a controversial solution or a political smokescreen. Work requirements, a cornerstone of the GOP's Medicaid plan, have ignited fierce debate. Proponents argue that requiring able-bodied adults to work or engage in job training promotes self-sufficiency and reduces dependence on government assistance. They contend that work requirements encourage individuals to transition to employer-sponsored healthcare, reducing reliance on Medicaid. However, critics counter that work requirements create bureaucratic hurdles and administrative complexities that disproportionately burden low-income individuals, who often face challenges such as lack of transportation, childcare, and job training opportunities. They argue that work requirements are more about shrinking the Medicaid rolls than promoting work, and could result in individuals losing coverage due to administrative barriers rather than a lack of effort. Section 6. Trump's tightrope walk, balancing fiscal conservatism with protecting the vulnerable. Trump's stance on Medicaid cuts reflects a delicate balancing act between his desire to appease fiscal conservatives within the GOP and his campaign promise to protect vulnerable Americans. He has publicly distanced himself from the term cuts, instead emphasizing the need to eliminate waste, fraud, and abuse within the program. Trump has repeatedly stated his commitment to preserving Medicaid for the most vulnerable, including children, pregnant women, the elderly, and individuals with disabilities. This messaging reflects an attempt to soften the political blowback from potential cuts and appeal to a broader swath of the electorate. However, critics remain skeptical, arguing that any reductions in Medicaid funding will inevitably impact the most vulnerable, regardless of political rhetoric. Section 7. Republican Discord, a House divided on Medicaid cuts. Despite presenting a united front in their quest to cut Medicaid, cracks have emerged within the Republican Party. Fiscal hawks, eager to achieve substantial budget savings, push for deeper cuts than those proposed by House leadership. They argue that the current proposals do not go far enough to address the program's long-term sustainability. Conversely, moderate Republicans, particularly those representing states that expanded Medicaid under the ACA, express reservations about cuts that could harm their constituents. They fear that significant reductions in Medicaid funding could lead to job losses in the healthcare sector and harm access to care in their states. This internal division within the GOP complicates the legislative path for Medicaid cuts and could empower Democrats to extract concessions. Section 8. Democratic Opposition, a unified front against Medicaid reductions. Democrats stand united in their opposition to any cuts to Medicaid, framing the issue as an assault on the poor, elderly, and disabled. They argue that Medicaid serves as a vital safety net for millions of Americans, providing access to essential healthcare services that would otherwise be unaffordable. Democrats plan to leverage the 2017 ACA repeal fight as a cautionary tale, reminding voters of the GOP's willingness to cut healthcare for the most vulnerable. They will likely employ a multi-pronged strategy, combining legislative opposition with grassroots mobilization and public awareness campaigns to pressure Republicans and sway public opinion. Section 9. The political battlefield Medicaid cuts as a 2026 campaign issue. The battle over Medicaid cuts is poised to become a defining issue in the 2026 midterm elections. Democrats, energized by their success in blocking the ACA repeal and capitalizing on public concern over healthcare, are eager to paint Republicans as out of touch with the needs of ordinary Americans. They will likely highlight the stories of individuals and families who rely on Medicaid, emphasizing the potential human cost of cuts. Republicans, aware of the political risks, will attempt to frame Medicaid reforms as necessary to ensure the program's long-term solvency and prevent it from becoming a drag on the economy. They will likely focus on messaging that emphasizes eliminating waste, fraud, and abuse, while portraying Democrats as defenders of an unsustainable status quo. The outcome of this battle will have significant implications for both parties and the future of healthcare in America.